Hello guys and welcome back. Today we'll be moving from the mountains and hills of central Italy and go a bit east towards the hill of the Italian boot, Apulia. Now this region is quite interesting as it was the location of another migration in the 15th century BC by a group of people known as the Iapygians. Their origins seem to point at Illyria, since there seems to be a vague cultural affinity with the two people. Stronger affinities than the Oscan Umbrians and the Italiotes that lived in south from them, for sure. After about 4 centuries of taking over land and creating a culture which was different from their Illyrian ancestors back in Illyria, the Iapygians, and in addition to their big family, in the 11th century BC, a new Illyrian migration landed in southern Apulia, where it settled. These people were called the Messapians, who will be the focus for this video. The Messapians stood out in history not only for their overwhelming number of things and cities they left behind, but also due to their language and overall peculiar culture. Last summer I visited a museum and I see a lot of vases, statues, spearheads, and even skeletons, the last of which was striking evidence for imagining how they looked like. More on that later. Now, their language, for all we know, had traveled around the Mediterranean in the form of coins, and it seemed to be a centum language, meaning that the letter K, they pronounce it as Q instead of Q. The languages that pronounce K in the second way I mentioned were called the Satum languages, which included the Indo-European languages from Eastern Europe and other parts of Asia. Germanic, Celtic, Illyrian, and other Italian languages are other examples of sanctum languages. The Messapians, it seems, were made out of artisans, farmers, traders, and to a lesser extent shepherds. They were organized in city-states, the biggest of which being Rudia, founded in the 9th century. It became a cultural center of Messapian culture from the 6th century until the Roman conquest of Apulia. Then it lost its title of the biggest city in Messapia to Lupii, which is known as Lecce today. The Messapians were exposed to a lot of Greek influence over their existence. This didn't stop them from keeping their culture and by coming up with some good designs in their vases. I really like the design of the handle specifically. The Messapians had also a history of fighting a lot of wars against their Greek neighbors, such as the Greek city-state of Taras, which kept on trying to expand in their lands, though the Messapians often won. They became so famous in the battlefield that the Greek writer Dionysius of Halicarnassus thought they were related to the Spartans. Also, this is the same guy who thought the Umbrians were related to the Spartans as well because they did not have walls around their settlements. Now, if you ask me, that's a bunch of bull. The Messapians' best allies were their cousins, the Iapygians, whom divided into 2 groups, the Peucetians in the central part of Apulia, and Daonians, who lived in the north. They spoke the same language apparently, but other than that we do not know much about them. This brings us to the question, where are the Messapians now? Well, as I mentioned before, they were conquered by the Romans, and quite easily I might add, because the constant conflict with Taras kind of wasted a lot of the Messapian resources for war. The Iapygian culture was eventually absorbed into the Latin one after a couple of centuries, and that's it. Now, remember when I mentioned the skeleton in the museum? This is it, in all its beauty. According to the things I read in the museum, the skeleton belonged to a Messapian horseman, which for convenience we'll call Jeb. Now, it seems that Jeb spent a lot of time riding, judging by its weird legs, and he showed slight sign of malnutrition, making him a bit short, about 160 centimeters. So not that short from an average Roman. At the end, all Italians seem to be short. He died when he was probably in his late 30s. He had wide shoulders but was kinda skinny. He had brown straight hair and brown eyes, and he was found in the middle of a field with a broken rib. So we can imagine he was killed or just fell on his horse. This sort of reminds me of that guy who was found in Pompeii dead while he was masturbating. Anyways, this is all I have. If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time with a brand new video.